Shalom, TaNaKh Wisdom. Continuing from sacrifice. In Genesis chapter 22, this is the account where Abraham is responding to Yahweh calling him to sacrifice his son Yitzhak, or Isaac. And so I'll start in chapter 22, verse 6. It says, "So Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son's shoulders, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and the two of them went together." And verse 8, and Abraham said, verse 7, "But Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, 'My father.' And he said, 'Here I am, my son.' Then he said, 'Look, the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?' And Abraham said, 'My son, powers, Elohim will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering.' So the two of them went together. So Isaac said, 'Okay, Yahweh will provide the lamb for the burnt offering.' Then, verse 9, they came to the place of which Powers had told him, and Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order, and he bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the messenger of Yahweh called to him from heaven and said, 'Abraham, Abraham.' So he said, 'Here I am.' And Yahweh said, 'Do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear Powers, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me.'" The point I want to highlight is Isaac's obedience. It's a commentary on how good a father Abraham was in habituating his son, training his son up upon the mouth of his way, to where Isaac trusted his father because he knew his father walked with Yahweh. And he said, and he allowed himself to be bound consciously and laid upon the altar to be sacrificed. And when Abraham was about to kill his son, miraculous intervention, Isaac was saved by the hand of Yahweh. Now, Isaac, by the way, he was like 30 years old. The place traditionally was Mount Moriah. 30 years old was when men began to take responsibilities. Yeshua was 30 years old when he began his ministry. Solomon was 30 years old when he began reigning, like his father David began. They began at 30 years old. A man is mature at 40 years old. He began accepting responsibilities at 30 years old. The Hebrew word for youth is Na'ar, Nun Ayin Resh, and it's from birth to 40 years old. That's just by the way, another upload. Okay? So the point is that Isaac was obedient to the point of making his life vulnerable to being killed. And Yahweh manifested himself and saved him from slaughter. Now, in Romans chapter 12, the scripture says, verse 1, "I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the compassions of Powers, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, prepared, acceptable to Powers, which is your reasonable service," which is your rational, understanding, comprehensive service to Yahweh, right? So, he said that you present your bodies. The word bodies is gawa, gimel, wow, hey. And it's a corpse, a lifeless body, right? A living sacrifice. Remember first covenant, zavach, slaughtering an animal, act for a higher purpose. Second covenant, because Yeshua fulfilled that part of the Torah for us, we don't have to do that anymore. Second covenant, we karav, we come close, we draw near, we become relative to Powers, right? So he says, let your lifeless bodies be drawn near, come close, be relative to me, and I will give you life, chayi, living by virtue of Yahweh's thoughts, life, His Spirit dwelling in us, our thinking, right? Verse 2, he says, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed. That Hebrew word transformed is chalaf. It literally means a slaughtering knife. Do not be don't conform to this world, but be transformed. Chalaf, a slaughtering knife, and you cut out your mind, all the knowledge that you've gained, that you've learned. One of the words for fool, you can handle all this information. You're made in His image, right? We're being restored to His likeness. One of the words for fool is sakal. Sakal, samek, kaf, lamed. And it means depending on unreliable knowledge. That's a fool, okay? And so this is what he's saying. The wisdom of this world is foolishness to Yahweh. And the wisdom of Yahweh is foolishness to the world. So we, as His servants, He calls us to be like Isaac was in Genesis 22, offer our bodies as a living sacrifice. The antitype was the story of Isaac allowing himself to be slaughtered on the altar for Abraham's obedience. Yeah? And so we too now are called by Yahweh to present our bodies lifeless, right? Filled with His life, living by virtue of His thoughts, as a sacrifice upon the altar, consciously aware of it, right? Which is our reasonable service. And don't conform to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. All the knowledge that we've learned and matriculated in this world, He tells us to get a slaughtering knife, cut it out, exchange, and throw away, make it disappear, and take the mind of Yahweh. Think on things above, not on things on the earth. Live by virtue of my thoughts, and you will have life. And the point in closing is, when we walk in obedience to the point to where it makes us vulnerable to being slaughtered or for death, then we'll have a miraculous appearing of His hand to save us and bring deliverance. And the promise of Psalms 34:7, the messenger of Yahweh is encamped or encircles around those who fear Him to deliver them. Because we are the light of the world, darkness cannot overtake it, and the enemy has been defeated. In Yeshua's name, Shalom, TaNaKh Wisdom.